be sold for junk value. Okay?
Is there a certain time that you can save it to see if you need to use it for another project that it would fit there?
Well, put it this way. If by the time we're in our lawsuit and you haven't sold it yet, and it's, I mean, everybody can look at it and see that, look, this is something that's so difficult to be used in another project, or, I mean, you have to really be lucky. I mean, then I don't think anybody's going to say that this is something that's not specially fabricated. Also, let's assume that, we're going to get into notice to owners later on, but just know something about specially fabricated materials. You have 45 days to serve a notice to owner. 45 days after commencement, in other words. So the time runs on a notice to owner for specially fabricated materials from the day that you actually begin. Okay? Now, where you actually begin, it's a little bit unclear, but in other words, for notice to owners on specially fabricated materials, get that notice to owner out as soon as you can.
So it's not the date of the contract you sign, it's the date when you say you started the project.
Yes, but let me tell you, if it were me, as soon as I signed the contract, I'd be trying to get the notice to owner out, because you're trying to leave as little question as possible. You don't want an attorney like me piercing you with a deposition and questions to try to find out when you actually began. Because I'm going to be looking to get you out of that 45 days. And if you're close, I'm getting you out of it. And if I get you out of it, you have no lien rights. The other exception to the actual incorporation requirement, normal wastage. What do I mean by that? 10% for cuts for tile. Okay? That's the usual, and customary thing that I see for normal wastage. 4,000 square feet of marble that's being laid out in the house. 400 square feet isn't used because you're doing corners and and you need just normal waste and spares. That you can still lien for it. That's normal wastage, even though it wasn't ever actually used and incorporated for the permanent benefit in the house. Tools or equipment used in the improvement, those are also lienable, and rental equipment as well. So, for instance, you get a bulldozer and you use that on the project. You're not paid for it. You're doing grading and that type of work. You're allowed to lien for it. This is important. Well, it's all important. I wrote it. But this is important. I want you to pay attention to this, because this is really where I go ahead and I catch a lot of contractors that file liens. And I want you to understand what is not lienable, what not to put into your liens. And that is work not performed. You have a $100,000 contract. You were terminated prior to completing. You may have done $70,000 worth of work. Don't lien for the $100,000. You haven't worked, for the full entire amount that you have not done. You need to understand that you can't lien for what you have not done. The purpose of a lien is you're getting to lien a property based upon the labor, services, and material that you have actually furnished to the property. That's what you have a lien on. I've improved your property by this amount, and therefore I have a lien on that property for this amount, and therefore I can foreclose and sell it for that amount. So if you didn't furnish the work, the labor, the services, or the material to the property, you ain't getting a lien on that. Now there's an exception to that, and that is the substantial completion doctrine. I was involved in a case, and I'll tell you it's a stupid case. It was my father who was running our plumbing company at the time, and if it wasn't for him, I never would have done this. But we contracted with an attorney. The attorney had a water service line installed, a new one. The only thing left on this project was to just simply cover up the trench and allow the inspector to see it first. So they can inspect it, cover up the trench, and we're done. We passed. Our contract contained a clause. The clause said that final payment is due prior to final inspection. The attorney says, I don't care what it says. I'm not paying you until the final inspection is passed. Well, we had two people going at it at loggerheads, and ultimately we sued the attorney, who refused to pay until it passed final inspection. And now the water service line worked. He turned it on. The man had water to his house. Well, the attorney on the other side appealed it twice, and $36,000 later in attorney's fees over an $800 claim. It was the dumbest case I'd ever been involved in. I shook my head like you are the entire way through. At both of them. I don't care who won, who lost. It was the stupidest case in the world. But you know what? That to me was a good case to define substantial completion. We were able to lien for the entire amount, even though technically we weren't completed under the substantial completion doctrine, because it was so close to what was actually contracted for, and it rendered all of the uses, that it would be unfair to deny the contractor the full value of the performance. So the substantial completion doctrine is that. For instance, let's say an electrical contractor runs all the wires, everything turns on. That would be another example. In other words, it's so far along that it actually performs as it was. Now that's not the technical definition, but that's how I keep it straight in my mind. For maintenance, now we have a nursery company in here as well. Maintenance, let's talk about landscaping. Landscaping, if you are planting trees, let's go back to the definition. Is it being actually incorporated? If you're planting plants, absolutely, actually incorporated. Is it for its permanent benefit? Yes, it's intended to stay there. People don't usually pluck out trees on a regular basis. Well, what about cutting hedges and mowing lawns? There's a case out at Grand Point. No, that's not lienable. That's regular maintenance. It's not for its permanent benefit, and nothing's being actually incorporated into the property. That's why it's our go-to definition is the actual incorporation for the permanent benefit to determine whether it's lienable. So to the extent that there's a contract for that type of work, you need to understand that maybe you need to differentiate or do line items for what work is being done. And for maintenance and what's being done as far as planting trees and other sorts for the permanent benefit.
Got a roll-off company supplying dumpsters, to construction sites and to residential. We still file notice orders for stuff like that.
Yeah, actually that came up in another seminar. 713.01 subsection 14 specifically says for solid waste removal.
Right.
That was a new incorporation, newly amended statute as of that a couple of years ago.
Right.
And I'm sure there was some waste management lobbyists that pushed that one through.
Yeah.
Because it's a lot of construction debris. Yeah, so that's lienable as well as final cleanup as well as lienable, even though you're not actually incorporating anything.
Right.
Okay. Next one is overhead and profit. This is something that a lot of people hear about. They don't understand it. I don't understand. What do you mean? I just did this whole job. You mean I can't lien for my profit? How am I supposed to make any money? That doesn't make any sense. Well, no. It depends upon how your contracts are written to determine whether or not it's lienable or not. Well, what do I mean by that? Let's assume that you have a contract for $100,000. Let's do this. Let's assume that you have a contract that has unit pricing. The item that we're going to lien for says $100. Let's assume that the contract says, and we're talking about overhead and profit now. It says $100 plus 10% for overhead plus 15% for profit. In other words, 25% profit. That item, the only thing that you're going to be able to lien for is the $100, not the 10% plus the 15% for overhead and for profit, because the overhead and the profit are not actually incorporated into the project for its permanent benefit. Scenario number 2, and this is going to be lienable. The same unit pricing for the same exact item, $125. With no separate delineation for overhead and profit, lienable, 100%, $125. Okay? So, in other words, when I go through contracts, I'm going through to see if the other side has put in overhead and profit. And if I see that overhead and profit in there as a separate line item, that's fraudulent lien. That's something that the case is clearly not lienable by any stretch of the imagination. And if you do lien for it, it's a fraudulent lien, and I have a cause of action against you now.